Now we're on Daf Samachei Amud Beis, and the last two words, Amar Rava, the previous Amud. Rava now is going to respond to Abai's Kasha, and he says, Karbonos Tzibur, which are taken from the Trumas Halishka, which is the monies that belong to the entire community, Ka'amrit, you're asking me a Kasha on the din of Shkolim, from a case of the par v'sar shel Yom Kippurim, which are karbonos tzibur. That's not a fair kasha. Why? Shani karbonos tzibur. With regard to karbonos tzibur, we have a principle that the karbonos of this year are not suitable for next year. And the cutoff date between last year and this year is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And from Rosh Chodesh Nisan and on, all the Karbonos Tzibur will have to be taken from the new set of Shkolim. And how do we derive this conclusion that every year we need the Karbonos Tzibur from new Shkolim, not from last year? Kid Rab Tavi, Omer Rab Oshia, Rab Tavi, Omer Rab Oshia, Omer Kra. This is a pasuk in Parshas Pinchas. It says, "Zotz olas chodesh bechodsho," and the end of the pasuk is l'chodshei hashana. So the truth is that in this one short pasuk, the word chadash, or chodesh, I should say, appears not once, not twice, but thrice. It says, "Zotz olas chodesh." That's number one. Bechodsho, number two. L'chodshei hashana, number three. Amar Torah, this is the Joshua Rav Oshia. Chadesh ve'haveli karba mitruma chadasha. That with regard to one of the months in the year, we need to be mechadesh the karbonos. From that month and on, we have to bring karbonos tzibur from the monies of the truma chadasha, meaning this year's truma chadasha, and not from last year's. Now, which month of the year is the cutoff point between this year and last year? So that's a Gemara Rosh Hashanah that has Gzeir Shava Shana to teach me that it's Chodesh Nisan, which is called Rishon Hu L'chol Chodshei Hashana. So we have Chodshei Hashana, and we're talking about Nisan. So therefore, the Gemara defends Rava's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, and we cannot take the par v'sar of this year and use it a year down the line. And that has nothing to do with Rabbi Yehuda, the way Rava explained it, that with regard to your obligation to pay into the shkolim, you can pay this year for next year. So with regard to Karbonos Tzibur, we have this Gezeres HaKosel that teaches me that Havei Karban Mitruma Chadasha. And therefore I can't use last year's Karban Tzibur for this year. But with regard to Shkolim, the Torah never gave that limitation rule. And the Shkolim that I gave this year could count and accrue for my obligation of next year, according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara says, Ha Tenach Sa'ir. I understand very well your logic that you cannot bring the soyer of Yom Kippur from last year's soyer. Why? It's a carbon tzibur, and a carbon tzibur has to be purchased from the ksafim, the monies of the lishka, the trumas lishka. So now we have to buy the carbon tzibur for this year from the new truma of this year. We can't use, therefore, the soyer that was purchased with the monies in the Trumas Halishka of last year. But par, why does the Bryce include par in this business? I mean, par is a carbon yachid. It's not a carbon tzibur. That's the Kohen Gadol's personal owned par. Doesn't come from the Trumas Halishka. So as far as the carbon yachid is concerned, we don't have a Gzeres HaKosu Mitruma Chadasha. There's no Mitruma Chadasha. It's not coming from the Truma. It's coming from the Kohen Gadol's private bank account. Is Michael and Maimar. Why do we completely disqualify the power of this year, why not bring it next year? We're afraid that the spectator who sees that we're leaving this power from one year to the other, he might come to the conclusion that we could do the same thing with the Sawyer. And if we can't be makriv with the Sawyer this year, we'll delay it and be makriv of it next year. So the Gemara asks, "V'chi mishum gzeira yamusu?" Rabbi Yehuda says that the parent Sawyer go lemisa. We know that when you can't bring a carbon, then the law is Yiroy and she's tired. We send it out to the grazing land until it becomes Balmum. But we never had a loch of Tammuz. I mean, Tammuz only applies when you set up a chatos this year and it got lost and you replaced it with a second par. Then we say Tammuz. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, we may even say that for a chatos hatzibur. But why should Rabbi Yehuda say Tammuz here? Because of Gzeira? Gzeira because we might confuse the par with the Sawyer? Therefore, Tammuz, it's enough to say Yirah Cheese Sawyer. The Odin, furthermore, we have another kasha. Od Rabbi Tavi, Omer Rabbi Yoshia, who says that every korban tzibur has to be brought from the Truma Chadasha post Nisan, is gufa, that Allah itself is mitzvah, meaning it's only a lechatchila mitzvah. It's not ma'akiv, it's not critical, it's not indispensable. The Omer Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul, Karbonas Tzibur Aboy B'Echad Ben Nisan, mitzvah lahavi min achadash. We have a mitzvah to bring it from the new truma, but you see the word mitzvah here, and then the Brisa spells it out clearly. Im hevi min hayoshan, if he brought a korban tzibur from last year's truma, Yotza, the evidence was Yotze. El Shachisar mitzvah. He's missing that special enhancement, that special mitzvah of bringing the korban tzibur from the new Truma Salishka. So if it's only a mitzvah, then you're going to make a gzera from par to Sawyer, when in Sawyer itself it's only a mitzvah. And now you're going to tell me, therefore, the par has to die? El Amar Abzera. The reason why the par of the Sawyer of Yom Kippur, if we find it after we were makriv others as a replacement, why is the dinam lemisa, and we cannot leave them and redesignate them for next year, is lefi she'en hagorol kovea mishana lechaverta. The gorol that the Kohen did on the seirim for this Yom Kippur before they got lost is only kovea the shemos, respectively, of the Soil Hashem and Soil Azazel, Mishana Zu Lechaverta. Ein HaGorol. Right? The Gorol can only be Kovea Mishana Zu, but the Gorol cannot be Kovea for the next year. So the Gemara says, all right, so what are you missing now? You're missing a Gorol. All right, so next year we'll do a Gorol. The Gemara asks, and they say, Nagril. Right? Let's take these seirim next year and we'll do a garol. We'll start from scratch. I mean, here there's a lot of literature here. He says, what happens if in the second garol, a year down the line, it gets swapped in the other direction? You know, that which was Hashem now becomes Azazel. How can we do that? And he says the answer is, the original agrol, Omoel Klum. It's not valid at all. Now, that's not so simple, because if the gorol of this year is not valid, so why do we have a din of Misa? I mean, you could just do a new gorol. Very complicated. In any event, the Gemara answers that we're not going to allow leaving the Sawyer for next year and doing another Hagrola. Gzera Shebeyomru Hagorol Kovea Mishon L'Chaverta. It could be the spectators are not aware of the fact that you're doing a second Gorol, and they come to the mistaken conclusion that why they're using the Sawyer of last year's because they rely on last year's Gorol. I'm very bothered, by the way, by the sugya because we have a principle of ein shvus b'migdash. I mean, who are making these errors? I mean, is the transmission of the halacha not reliable amongst the Kohanim? I mean, it's obviously the Pirchei Kahuna. Imagine we're making zeros that people will misunderstand which girl was effective. I mean, yeah, I understand that you could have a gzera that if somebody eats basar of b'cholav, so Yenim is going to think you're allowed to eat basar behema b'cholav. Okay, you're talking about the Amchay, but when you're talking about the Beis Hamikdash and the Seirim, the high point of Yom Kippurim, these gzeros, I don't know, I'm missing a little bit of Havana. The Gemara asks, "Ha'teinach." According to this answer that you gave, I understand the sire. Why we're not makriv next year, the sire of this year, because we need a hagrola. But par, right? If the par of the Kohen Gadol doesn't have hagrola, is Michael and Meimar. How are you going to say that? Oh, we have to reject this par and not bring it next year because what? Because it needs a new hagrola. It doesn't need hagrola. So the Gemara answers, Gzera para to soyer. I mean, another Gzera. That if we would allow this year's par to be brought next year, then somebody might think that we could do the same thing with the soyer and take this year's soyer and bring it next year, which we can't do because we need a new hagrola. And even if you'll tell me, well, let's do a new hagrola, but the Gzera is that people think that the first hagrola was effective. So the Gemara is not happy for a different reason, not the way I dramatized it, but rather the Chibi Shum Gzera Yamusu. Again, once again, the Gemara says that when you have Gzeros, you don't have to implement a Misa and force the starve the thing to death. All you have to do is send it out to the pasture land. So now the Gemara tries to offer a whole different answer as to why the Par and Sar Shel Yom Kippurim, when they got lost and we found them, why is Dinam Lemisa? Why do we allow them to die? Amru Rabban L'Kamit Abaye, Gzera Mishum Chata Shemesu Ba'aleha. We're afraid that maybe the Kohen Gadol will die during the course of the year, and there's going to be a replacement Kohen Gadol, and they're going to bring the par of last year, and the par is the Karban Chatas of the Kohen Gadol. Once the Kohen Gadol loses, I mean, he dies, and therefore this Chatas, which is his personal Chatas, is a Chatas Shemesu Ba'aleha, where we have Halacha Moshe Sinai that it's Dinam Lemisa. So we can't take the chance, says Abaye, of bringing this par next year because we have to worry about the fact that maybe the Kohen Gadol will die. So the Gemara says, "Ha'teina par." That'll only explain the case of the par because it's a private individual carbon of the Kohen Gadol, and if he dies, then we have a din of Chata Shemesu Ba'aleha is Lemisa, and we have to worry about the possibility that the Kohen Gadol might die. But Soyer, Ma'ikal Meimar, why should we docha the Soyer? Why can't we bring the Soyer a year down the line? So again, the Gemara is going to say the Gzera in the opposite direction. Gzera Soyer or to par. If they're going to wait and delay with this Soyer and bring it next year, then maybe the person will come to the conclusion that he could do the same thing with a par and wait till last year. And again, we're afraid that if we wait and delay the par for another year, maybe the Kohen Gadol will die in between. So Gemara says once again, it's like a shakutai that repeats itself over and over again. And if you're only worried about a gzera, so you don't have to starve the sire to death, why not just send it out to the pasture land till it becomes a balbu? Ella, says the Gemara, gzera mishum chata sha'avra shnasa. The halacha is that a chatos, if it's more than a year old, since its birth, a year has passed by, it becomes posel akrov. So if we're going to wait with this karba, with this behema, from one Yom Kippurim to the next Yom Kippurim, then we might get into a situation where it's already of Rosh Nasa. A year has passed since its birth, and it's no longer Royal Akrava. So the Gemara asks the obvious question. Gzeira? You call that Gzeira? You're afraid that maybe it'll be a Chatash of Rosh Nasa. He gufa Chatash of Rosh Nasa. It's a year from one Yom Kippurim to the other Yom Kippurim, plus the 8 days that we have to wait since the birth. So it's a year plus 8 days. So by definition, by waiting another year, it's already Chatash of Rosh Nasa. Why do you call that Gzeira? Holokashik Rebbe. And here we introduce the sheet of Rebbe. So by way of introduction, the sheet of Rebbe addresses what's called Bate Arei Choma. The walled cities from the time of Yoshua have a special din, a parsha in the Torah, that if you sell a piece of property in an Ir Mukefes Choma Miltz Yoshua, the Torah allows you up to 12 months, a full year, to be goel the sod. You go back to the buyer, give him his money back, and you get your sod back, whether he likes it or not. Now, there's going to be a machlokas Rebbe and Chacham about how to calculate that 12-month period. At what point does the karka or the bias become what's called muchlat? Muchlat means it's permanently behechlate in the possession of the buyer, and the mocher, the seller, no longer has a right to redeem it. Rebbe says that we calculate the 12-month period by Yemos Hachama, by the solar calendar, which is 365 days, but not by our Jewish calculation, the lunar calendar, which has a year of 354 days. There's always a discrepancy between the solar year and the lunar year of 11 days. And Rebbe says that when we allow the mocher a full year, it's a solar year. So even though the calendar date in the Hebrew calendar has passed, meaning the new year, calculating, let's say he sold it on Rosh Chodesh Adar, and it's now Rosh Chodesh Adar a year later, the mocher still has rights for another 11 days to redeem his field or his house, because the Yemos Hacham of 365 days have not passed. Now, that halacha of Rebbe is addressing Bate Arei Choma. The Gemara now applies the same yardstick to the issue of a carbon, right? In this case, we're talking about a carbon chatos, and it becomes pasul hakrava after a Rosh Nasa, but the Shnasa is going to be a full 365 days of a solar calendar year. The Sanya we learned in the Rice Shana Tmima. The Torah says in Vayikra Perek Chaf Hey, the end of Sefer Vayikra, it says V'im lo yikael ad malot lo Shana Tmima. It's v'kama bayis asher b'yer shalo choma litzvitusa. It says shlakona osa l'dorosa. And how do we calculate this Shana Tmima? First, the Brisa quotes Rebbe, and Rebbe says, Monesh shlosh me'os v'shishim v'chamisha yom kiminyan yemos hacham. We calculate 365 days from the sale, and even though before the 365 days, after 354 days, he's already past the 12 months of the lunar calendar, nevertheless, the bias is not chalut in the hands of the lokach. The mocher still has rights for another 11 days to redeem his field. And the same thing is going to apply in the opposite direction. If Bez is ma'aber the shana, let's say they had to be ma'aber the shana a certain number of times within a certain number of years in order to catch up and equate the solar and lunar calendar, so they add an extra month of Adar, and that extra month of Adar, according to Rebbe, is not part of the cheshbon, because everything depends upon the Yemos Hachama. Now, this case of a Shana Muberes is going to work against the mocher, because the mocher thinks he has until 12 months to, he's sort of laid back about it till he has to redeem his field. But in truth, even before the 12 months of a Hebrew calendar lunar year go by, he already lost his rights to redeem. It's already muchlat because 365 days have passed since the sale. Right? The Shana Muberes adds a whole month. Divrei Rebbe, chodesh miyom liyom, which means based on the lunar calendar. And again, as we said, that'll work in two directions. And now we turn to the Daf Samach Vav. The imnis avra, if Bezdin decides to be ma'avra the Shana an extra month, this avra lemocher. The mocher is going to gain, according to the Chachamim, because everything depends upon the lunar calendar. And a lunar year now has 13 months because it's a Shana Muberes. So the mocher is very happy to get an extra period of time, allowing him to redeem his field. Oh, now let's take Rebbe Shita and apply it to the case of the Sayer, which he was Magdish on Erev Yom HaKippurim. Let's take a Shana Pshuta, not a Shana Muberes, just a simple regular year. Now, Erev Yom HaKippurim is the 8th day since the Sayer was born. We're going to add 8 days to 12 lunar calendar months of 354 days. Did I get that right? Let me just go over it again. Yeah, 354 plus 8 is very good. It's only 362. He still has 3 days and it's still within its year. So therefore, according to Rebbe, when Yom Kippurim arrives next year, the Sayer is 364 days old. Oh, how did he get 364? 1 second, we said 8. We only got 362. Oh, because he's adding Erev Yom Kippur, maybe. Wait, 1 second. Let me just see how he got 364. The Masechet is throwing me off. Oh, I see. So he's adding Erev Yom Kippur plus the Yom Kippur of the next year because he's only going to be makrivid on Yom Kippur. So that jacks it up from 362 to 364. But in any event, it's still within the 365, which means that it's still low of Rosh Hashanah because Rebbe holds of Rosh Hashanah means the most hacham of the 365 days. Is therefore, we're going to have a gzera here. It's not gufa, as we said before. It's not by definition that the Sayer is already over Shnasa. It might necessarily not. It's not necessarily over Shnasa, but we have a gzera that if we allow him to wait, it might become over Shnasa. Hanicha Sayer par ma'ikol meimer gzera par otu Sayer. V'chiv mishum gzera yavus v'od chatash over Shnasa l're'ia azla. Kina Amar Ishlakish, Chatash of Shnasa, Roim Osa, Ki'ilu Hi Omedes V'Beis HaKvaros, Roa. The din is Roa Achi Style. All right, then this is where we're going to stop for today. Just let's make a note of it. We're here on the top of Samach Vav, and that's where we'll pick it up in Mirza Shem tomorrow. Okay, then have a great day. Thank you so much.